Happy Juneteenth, everyone. So I'll be introducing my sis, Dani Criss, the artist. She is a dancer, scholar, educator, performer, just a wonderful all-around individual. She reigns from Durham, North Carolina. She she is based in New York and North Carolina, but works nationwide. And she specializes in West African dance. She is an instructor who embraces the African diaspora in celebration of her ancestral roots. Dani has performed and choreographed pieces that have graced the stages of the American College Dance Association, American Desk Festival, Brooklyn Arts Exchange, and more. Dani, as always, it's a pleasure to see you and be graced by your presence. I love you so, so much, and thank you for doing this. Everybody, I will say before she speaks, she does have a performance, so this will be a relatively quick presentation. So whatever questions you have, quick answers, quick responses, keep them at the top of your dome. So Dani, I pass the mic to you.
Greetings, everyone. Hopefully we can hear. Thumbs up if you can hear me. We're good. Perfect. Because I'm outside. I'm in the country. I'm actually in North Carolina today. So thank you, Deja, for the introduction. And again, greetings and welcome to the community. Such a pleasure to be here in the presence with you all, and then also in the presence of Juneteenth. Happy holidays, everyone. Get free. Have a great one. Turn up, be Black, and celebrate Blackness. And it's all of its various mediums. So yes, as Deja said, I do have to slide to a show, but what I'm going to do and all of my many ways of moving. So forgive me, we're going to do this amazing quick presentation. We're going to slide through it, and then we're going to still have our Q&A. But what I'm going to do is switch to my mobile device so that I can hear you all and continue to be in conversation, and then hopefully continue to take in some of the great work that you guys are going to continue to discuss. So no further ado. Let's slide into this. Hopefully my professor hat won't top on too much, because when I get into it, then I start talking, and then we'll turn around. It's 2:00 and I'm like, oh no, I'm only on slide 2. But let's get into this. I'm going to share my screen. Bada bing, bada boom. So as Deja mentioned, the presentation today that we're going to be looking at is the continued journey to emancipation, because we got a little bit, but free-ish, as they say. We're celebrating Juneteenth, America's newest holiday. And so let's breeze through. Of course, today we're going to be talking about the legacy of Freedom Weekend, or also known as Juneteenth, how it's commemorated or celebrated, and as well, how can we keep the traditions and histories alive. So feel free to drop any comments, questions in the chat. I really like to make this any type of conversation or practice I'm engaged with very communal, noting that it's not only about me, but we all have our experiences and voices to lend inside of this conversation. And then also, if there's any resources and links about Juneteenth happening in your networks, any new information that you find in your continued research, please feel free to share it and keep the conversations going after today. All right, so what is Juneteenth? Juneteenth is June 19th, specifically June 19th, 1865, is marking the day that the last enslaved African Americans, and we want to note that they were not slaves, but they were enslaved people, and they were informed of their emancipation from the structure of slavery, noting that slavery is a structure in terms of keeping the country working. And so from the structure, and so how does the structure shift after that as history continues to move forward? The important to note about these things called holdout states, so places in the Confederate, Georgia, South Carolina, Texas, that were very gun-ho and having slavery be the backbone of their economy, were essentially not trying to listen to what happened after the Civil War, Union, Confederates, fighting, blah, blah, blah. Let's end it. Let's not end it. Yeah. Lincoln besides the Emancipation Proclamation naming that African Americans should be noted to, fight for their country, to be at least able to support themselves, deemed citizens, right? And so the Civil War, the Union wins, and these states are like, nah, I'm still really not trying to do this, even though that this is, law now, right? And so we consider them holdout states. Texas being one of the very last ones. On June 19th, there was the arrival of the Union. General Grover comes with an order from President Lincoln and the soldiers to let the enslaved African Americans and Africans know, the news, right? In terms of information traveling, and especially information traveling about their well-being, was not something that happened a lot. And of course, in terms of the accessibility of the information and then what to do after that was lack thereof. So, information spread slow, to say the least, right? But the moment the order was given, and specifically the order is noted, which is very important to name, because it when we think about emancipation, we think about, okay, yeah, you're free. Now you can do whatever it is you want. But the order actually was named that President Lincoln says that African Americans are now relinquished from their duties of slavery, and they should remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. Hence, that you are now not property, but you could stay in the same situation, but now be able to cater for your own rights. Okay. And so that was the switch, or that is the important information to note as we then shift into the Reconstruction era, and we're looking at, okay, how are a lot of African Americans supporting themselves and not supporting themselves. We look at the nature of sharecropping, which is essentially what working for wages is and what that looks like, right? Slavery, but with money, essentially. So it gives a new context and a new condition to the information about Juneteenth and how we continue to move forward. Also noting that even with the information of Juneteenth, okay, cool, slavery is, not necessarily the main structure. We're not supposed to do this. It was not officially abolished until the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which was still another, at least five, I mean, I'm not going to do math right now, but at least 5 to 6 months after the official news on Juneteenth, right? So we're looking at June and then the official abolishment in December, all right? So freedom rings. Juneteenth is alive and well. The information has been spread. We are now released from our chains, or released from the role in which we had prior. And so we look at what does that mean for our own liberation journey or our own emancipation, right? Specifically noting, as an artist, I teach / preach about finding your own liberation journey and what that means for you, right? In terms of when we're thinking about Juneteenth, right? The order states that, you should remain in the same situation and, get a bit more clout out of it. But, you're not necessarily shifting in the same circumstances and in the way that, releasing or full emancipation can look like, right? And so everyone, right, in terms of when you're looking at the history of African Americans, we in African American history, we look at how in the Reconstruction era things blossomed, right? Blossomed more than ever before. Being able to create businesses, Black politicians, Black educational system that still exists today, known as, the historically Black colleges and universities. All of that work started out of Juneteenth, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to remain in this same situation of being a sharecropper. What other ways can I emancipate my mind or uncondition my mind from the situations that I knew to see something else that could be better, right? And so there were multiple different ways of exploring, thinking about liberation, and then we're still thinking about that now, right? How are we still finding new ways to unlearn, uncondition, to expand beyond what we were essentially told that we could do, right? Or whatever the law says that we could do, or the order says that we can do, right? And so inside of that, the moment the news hit, the moment anytime celebration happens, take it to the streets, right? Galveston, Texas, the official location of the last given order, the enslaved African Americans immediately rushed inside of their communities. They began singing, dancing, chanting, crying, in terms of of course, a release of joy and sentiment, but also, in celebration, right? Noting that in times of celebration, sorrow, the cultural aesthetics of music, dance, gathering as a community, learning and talking and continuing to pass down traditions is a part of the culture in itself, no matter what aspect of history that you're looking at. And so when we come together for Juneteenth. So when we come together today, we're coming together to talk about, where we've been and where we're going. We're coming together to dance in celebration of our freedom and our existence. We're dancing to celebrate our vessels. We are singing to exclaim our joy. We are singing to share more messages, to share more words of communication, to share more words of perseverance as we continue on this fight, because it is not over, right? We gather together as a community because we are each other, right? We're not going to get through this without one another. We, the saying of we are stronger together, right? We gather, we learn from one another, we talk, we spread this information, we spread the traditions of our past ancestry and lineage, and how that is going to continue the strength and the plight to keep us forward. There are other ways of gathering inside of Juneteenth. There are always festivals. There are, communities that come together, such as this, right? Organizations come together to say, let's access this information. Let's talk about it. Let's be together in community. Let's spread this information. It's important. How do we continue to talk about emancipation? How do we continue to support the African American community? And so various things happen. It's community, it's gathering, it's spreading information. There's also a tradition that sparked out of the original Juneteenth celebration in Texas. That is the Miss Juneteenth tradition, right? The Miss Juneteenth pageant or festival, where it stemmed from the cultural remnants of slave balls and quadrum balls and cotillions, right? This expression of representing, a specific community, coming of age passage, coming of age or rites of passage, a situation in your community, gaining the ordeals, the characteristics, the information, the traditions from elders, people in your community, from the trainings and the practices, from the being in sisterhood with the other contestants. It's that tradition of Juneteenth, of the new emancipation, the coming out, the rites of passage. That tradition was brought inside of the original Juneteenth tradition. And in some areas, in some places, it continues to reign true today. And there's also a movie that was recently released about it, the Miss Juneteenth. I believe it's on like Amazon Prime and maybe Hulu. Check that out. It's another resource in terms of gaining information about Juneteenth in its largest capacity. And then of course, anytime we gather, we eat, right? We have to nurture each other. We have to nurture and thank the land, give traditions to our ancestors, give traditions to those forward. And so specifically with food, of course we eat, but there are always particular staples that are inside of the meals for Juneteenth that commemorate the existence of, how we tooled the earth, right? So for instance, watermelon was one of the only fruits that African Americans who were enslaved were able to grow inside of the land that they were working on. And so watermelon was like always around for them, the scrapes, the little ones, the big ones. And so watermelon is a crop that is very indigenous to our people, hence the stereotypes, you know, watermelon, fried chicken, all that. But it's a staple inside of the Juneteenth celebration, along with what's called red drink. You know, some people are like, what's in your cup? Well, it's red drink, right? Kool-Aid, red water, red sugar water is essentially what it is, their red drink or red punch. It can be anything now, but the symbolism of having a red drink on Juneteenth commemorates the bloodshed of the ancestors that are the ancestors that have, you know, paved the way, that have brought us to this point, that shed blood to get to the point of emancipation. Yes, and all of that, right? Other traditional foods that, you know, connect to the ancestry of West Africa, as well as to the crops that were told inside of enslavement. Okra, rice is another one, beans, all crops and staples inside of these meals and traditions. And then, of course, the honorary Juneteenth flag is also here as well. All right, our newest holiday, bringing it together. So as of June 18th, 2021, so all of yesterday, Juneteenth is now a federally recognized holiday, although this holiday has been celebrated for 156 years, but the acknowledgement of Juneteenth now as a federal holiday is notation to, you know, a lot of different things. It's notation to the nation finally announcing their attachment, and they've just been acting like it don't exist for years, their attachment to slavery, and what that is and what it has meant to the people of African-American ancestry and descendancy. It also, you know, potentially means, you know, a positive outlook looking forward. But it's also a notation that this is very much a minute step in what is next. And so we're thinking about that. What is next? What is this continued journey towards emancipation? The reminder that emancipation is not just about what is said that can be happened, but also the unlearning and the conditioning about being inside what you only know because you've never experienced anything else, or don't have the access to that other information. It also, you know, it means how can we continue to push this forward? There's a lot of, you know, celebration and recognition around this today, but, you know, what's next? How do we keep this momentum? How do we put this on the same platform as July 4th, right? How do we continue to spread the access of this information so that it's not only celebrated around the African-American community allies and accomplices? How is this a fully recognized holiday where there's not just, oh, I get the day off and some extra pay, but it's something that I'm actually actively participating in, all right? And then also, you know, this conversation was very brief. and also this is the first year of, you know, it being our newest holiday, quote unquote, right? So how do we, you know, let's keep it going, let's keep this momentum, let's keep this conversation, let's keep the resource shares, let's continue you know, being in celebration, let's continue to be in reflection, knowing that a lot of people fought to get to this point. You know, for example, the connection of, I'm going to miss her last name, but Miss Opal, if you ever heard of Miss Opal's walk, if not, it's another resource, look that up, in terms of how she, at 9 years old, took the dedication to walk from Texas to DC, in flight of making sure that Juneteenth was a recognized holiday, because her ancestors were a part of that work. And so, and you know, how do we, you know, make sure that we keep these traditions alive for the voices that did the work, but also the ones that are continuing to move forward. That is my presentation. That is the information I will leave you all with. This is continued work. This is a continued discussion. inside this holiday. So I'm going to connect to my other device and let's get this Q&A rolling. Or if there's any thoughts and feedback.
I'd love to start out by saying thank you so much. That was a really amazing presentation. So grateful. I'm Kiki Somerville, founder of the Fearless Artist, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to meet you and hear your wonderful. It's so many places to start, but I will say, can you talk a little bit about how, although emancipation was communicated, like a little bit more about how that was sort of spread, and why explain about why didn't the people just leave, why didn't they just walk out? What were the pressures that kept them there? Just talk a little bit more about that.
Definitely. Yeah, easy way to, let's see how to answer that. So I answered it in two parts. One, in terms of the information being spread. So, the nature and the conditions of enslavement were very vast, right? So there were some slave owners who were like, all right, cool, here's the information. You guys go, bye. There are some slave owners who were like, if they find out, they find out. There's some that are like, okay, I'll take my time to tell them until I figure out on my end. But of course, we're not only relying on their perspective, there's also communication between us as a people, right? So, once one of us finds out, it's going to spread somewhere else, right? And so a lot of that happened between plantations, especially somebody else's plantation, inside a note, that we had multiple different ways of communication, whether it was a drum, whether it was, you heard somebody singing something in some way, Moses finally came to bring me home, right? That was not, that's a very gospel traditional song, but it was written talking about going home, right? Going back to Africa or going back to a place that makes me feel real, right? So like there were multiple ways to spread the information. Once what we did with the information, once we got it, was different, right? So some of us were like, all right, cool, I'm out. Others were like, okay, where am I going? I don't know anything else, right? Like this is my home. If I step outside of, these white pearly gates or these white fences, where am I going after here, right? I don't know this is the best situation that I have. So I'm going to stay here and follow the order. I'm going to sharecrop. I'm going to, maybe find a way to emancipate myself inside of here. So perhaps I find a way to buy land, right? Since my 40 acres and a mill never came through, how do I find 2 acres, right? So that's part of the conditioning and the unconditioning, unlearning that we're still in, right? Like how do we, even though we don't have this information or we have the access, but we may not have the access to get to exactly what we want, how do we use what we have to get what we need?
There's a question from Amanda in the chat. What makes the federal holiday status of the day mean for making the date regarded more highly?
I wanted to read that after you said it.
For the holiday that you want other people to know, because a federal holiday will automatically make it so that we have to, at the very least, know baseline history of the holiday. Right. So what is it that you want people to know first and foremost, and what does this mean for the significance of regarding this day as high?
It's a great question. The federal holiday, unfortunately, gives validity to it, whether that is a great thing or a bad thing, but it gives validity to it, and it shouldn't. On the flip side of that, to your question, is what we should know is that we need to take time to honor the people that went through this, right? Hence the voices that have been working to make this valid without the validity of the federalization. So that would be how I would answer that, like the flip side. So it makes it valid, right? Like, okay, cool. People are gonna like now look into what this is versus when we were trying to tell y'all and nobody was listening.
Yeah, it
right?
feels almost like a, national average. Like, okay, great, thanks.
Right, like it's kind of like a checkbox. All right, cool. Y'all been asking for this for a while. That's the easiest thing we can do for right now.
The
right?
way I feel like it
off.
is, the way I feel like it is like a quick reclamation, and not so much. So much has been done so that we get here, and it feels like now's the appropriate time. Now, having gone through what we've gone through and learning from it, like doing both.
I agree. That was a great question, Amanda. Thank you. I do want to say briefly, this reminds me of Malcolm X. He said, the white man will try to satisfy us with symbolic victories rather than economic equity and real justice. Them validating this holiday doesn't mean anything because they haven't done and are not doing what needs to be done. But I think there's time for one more question, if there is one more question, and then we will release Dani to her Juneteenth celebrations down in Durham.
Yeah, but definitely wanted to double tap that. Yeah, sugarcoating is nothing new. Sugarcoating is nothing new. But yes, I think maybe I definitely just muted myself. Was there one more question in the chat? I thought. No. Okay. No, I read that wrong.
Okay, well, if not, Dani, my sister, thank you once again for showing up and showing out as always. I appreciate you dearly and endlessly, always love. Thank you for spending time with the Young Curators program and TFA, and rock the stage, girl, because I know you will.
Appreciate that. And again, y'all, thank you guys for being in conversation with me. Very lucrative discussion. Again, we graced the surface. All of this is very, very like, okay, cool. That's a little sprinkle. And to start the conversation, to give you a little like inkling of like, oh, okay, now I can continue to do research. Now I can find new ways to celebrate. Now I can find new ways of being support. Now I can find new ways of being in communication and in celebration. Don't forget in celebration, because this is a celebratory day for all. This is the real Emancipation Day. So y'all have a great one. Continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to celebrate. And we free-ish, y'all. We getting there. We working on it. Have a great one. Much love.
Awesome. Wow. That was really, really great. Really great. And she really gave us a lot of tools. And that's something I could see myself just watching again, just to make sure I get down a lot of those details. I really like the way it was presented. We could all digest many different ways of information, but I thought that the way that meant pretty much anyone could basically learn. This is history first, and it's nothing to be afraid of. It's something just to know and begin your interrogation of the way things are today, like with empathy. Put yourself in those people's shoes, knowing they're free, but not really knowing what to do next. If you think you're stuck, imagine that. Or just, do you think that changed the fear that they felt Do you really think they felt that they could talk back or step up or, you know, make a decision for themselves or their families and protect their families from racism? And, you know, no, that took time. So we're just talking about how all of us as a society had to get used to this idea that these were not property. These were human beings with self-determination. And look how far we have come. So I'm always celebrating how far we have come. And we just having conversations that are overdue. That's all. These conversations are long overdue. So, wonderful reflections.